evening, everybody. We're going to get started here. Hello, Louis. Tonight we have a riveting program. One of Sinai Temple's own, Andrei Iancu, is going to be in dialogue with Sinai Temple Men's Club's Executive Vice President, Jeff Kitchaven, on a discussion of patents. We're going to be talking about what it's like to work for our administration, what it is to be an immigrant with also Jewish heritage, and weave all those in a great dialogue, once again, between Andrei and Jeff. I'm just going to share a few-minute video with you guys of the Olympics that is going on now and what it means to our home country of Israel in our heart and our soul.
Israel won its first gold medal at the Tokyo Olympics. Israeli gymnast Artem Goldopiak made history on Sunday, winning an Olympic gold medal in the finals of the men's floor exercise. Israel's national anthem was played in Tokyo, and it made all of us here in Israel very proud. This was the second gold medal ever won by an Israeli Olympic athlete, and in the history of the Olympics, Israel won a total of 10 medals. So you can understand why it was a big deal for Israel and why it was all over the news here. Last Friday, Avishak Sember won the bronze medal in Taekwondo, and later, Israel's judo team took home the bronze in the team competition. But the Olympics also showed the reality in the Middle East. Israeli judoka Raz Hershko had a historic match with Saudi Arabian judoka Tahani Al-Katan. The Saudi judoka was under heavy pressure to boycott the match with Israeli judoka, but she refused to boycott it. Although Israel won the match, the Saudi judoka is a winner too, a winner of bravery, courage, and advancing peace through sports. This is amazing. And listen to this. The Israeli judoka said that after the match, they talked a little bit in the hall, shook hands, and hugged. And this is historic. This is the real example of what it means to leave politics out of sports. Israel and Saudi Arabia may not have relations yet, but I surely hope that we will establish diplomatic relations very soon. I also have bad examples to bring in politics into sports. Two athletes, or should I say two losers from Algeria and Sudan, decided to boycott a match with an Israeli athlete only because he is from Israel. This is his only crime. Listen, it's impossible to promote peace through boycott. True peace will not come through rejection, but acceptance. And the fact that the Algerian loser was received by his nation as a hero says a lot about education in Algeria. To reject rather than accept. To think that Israel is their biggest problem without even knowing not a single Israeli. It's really sad that in the Middle East, there are people that hate Israel without even knowing who the Israelis are. I hope that this minority will continue to shrink and join the majority of Arabs and others in the Middle East that choose love over hate, peace over conflict. Now, a really special moment that touched my heart was when Iranian-born judoka Said Moulay, who is representing Mongolia, won the silver medal and decided to dedicate it to Israel.
Israeli people is very friendly and have a good.
Said Moulay used to be in the Iranian national team. Well, that's until he refused an order to purposely lose in the 2019 World Championships to not face Israel's judoka, Sagi Mulki. So Said had to flee Iran because of this decision and found refuge in Mongolia. So this is what the Olympics look like from the Israeli angle. We are a small country, but we are winning medals and putting politics aside. Because the Olympics is about sports, not politics. Share this video.
Well, I hope everybody got enjoyment from that, to see what is going on in the Olympics today, to see where Israel is faring and how other countries in the world and individuals support and yet, deny Israel its legitimacy. I think we're going to prevail. And I hope, everybody is following, not only Israel, but the U.S. involvement there. So thank you for letting me share that with you. As I mentioned before, for folks who just joined, Jeff Kitchaven will be interviewing Andrei Iancu, and we will be having a Q&A at the end. So we hope that you would forward in your messages, into the chat. Jeff Kitchaven will be moderating. With that being said, I'll pass it to Jeff. Let's move forward with your discussion with Andrei.
Fabulous, Michael. Thank you so much. It's a delight to be here with Andrei Iancu. Andrei just completed a term as Undersecretary of Commerce for Intellectual Property and Director of the United States Patent and Trademark Office in Washington, D.C. Andrei was nominated by the President, confirmed by the Senate, unanimously, Andrei. Isn't that true?
That is absolutely true. Thanks, Jeff.
Unanimously, talking about bipartisanship. And Andrei, it's so wonderful to have you here. The world loves origin stories, and you've got plenty of them. So what I'd like to do is to divide up the interview into three basic chapters of your life, if you will. The origin of how you came to the United States and became an American, how you decided you wanted to become the Director of the United States Patent and Trademark Office and your accomplishments in that position, and then the origin of what you're doing now, the think tank with which you're involved and all the wonderful projects that you have underway right now.
Let's go. Great to be with you, by the way. Thanks for inviting me to be here, Jeff.
Well, we're very excited. You're so welcome, Andrei. It's an honor to have you. So let's start with story number one. Please tell us about how you came to the United States, what it felt like, what it meant to you, and how you became an American.
Well, so originally, as many of you know, I was born in Romania, and Romania at the time was a communist country. My parents wanted to leave for a very long time, basically since they were able to watch the Hungarian Revolution in 1956. They figured out that the Hungarians cannot get rid of the Soviets. Most likely the Romanians cannot do it either. So my dad wanted to leave ever since then. And eventually it took them 25 years. They finally got out in 1981, still the height of the communist regime in Romania, height of the Cold War across the globe. You know, the United States had a policy of accepting political refugees from the Soviet bloc. And that's how we got here at that time. We left Romania at the end of 1980. Back then, you had to do a sojourn in Europe someplace. We stayed a few months in Rome and arrived here early 1981, which, by the way, it's 40 years. Freaked me out when I realized this, Jeff. 40 years this year.
Young men like us talking about things 40 years in the past, Andrei. It's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. Yeah.
So before we get to the sojourn, did your parents just around the dinner table one night say to you, Andrei, guess what? We're leaving Romania. How did that happen?
Yeah, well, look, I was a kid. Obviously, they had been planning this for a very long time. But for me, it wasn't even like that. I went to school that particular day in December of 1980. My dad picked me up, as he would often do, and he said, we're not going home tonight. We're going to the airport. And so that's how it went.
Wow. How old were you?
I was 12.
Was it a state of shock? How did you feel that day?
Yeah, look, you don't know what's happening. And you don't know what's happening, and it's a bit of an adventure. It's almost impossible to describe, but the more interesting part was eventually getting to the United States. At a time, I don't think folks in today's generations can understand, because we are so interconnected. Here we are by Zoom, from people dialing in from across the United States. And we instantaneously see nowadays, how life is almost everywhere around the world. Back then, coming here in this land of unbelievable freedom and prosperity from backwards communist regime that had hindered progress for several decades, it was literally like coming from the moon. It was not possible. It really was not as if you're coming from another country of people who just simply had different customs and a different language. It culturally, it was incredibly different and unexpected.
Was there?
But it's difficult to describe for folks to to understand in today's world.
Was there Jewish life in Romania? Were you able to observe Jewish holidays?
Yeah, kind of, more or less. Look, Romania has a rich history of Jewish life, especially before the war. But it had dwindled at the time. But still, there's a Jewish community, and Romania, if you might recall, Jeff, back then was the only country in the communist bloc that retained its ties with Israel. And there was that we would go to synagogue. We celebrated all the major holidays. So I had my bar mitzvah training there, by the way, but we left in between. So the ultimate bar mitzvah was here.
Where was your bar mitzvah?
At Beth Jacob.
Oh, right over on Olympic Boulevard.
Yep.
Fantastic. So when you came to the United States, Andrei, in terms of Jewish life and Jewish identity, was it a huge change? Was it dramatic?
Yeah, it was very different, especially, and by the way, it's not like you're going from Bucharest, Romania, which was, overall several decades behind the United States as a whole, for reasons that are more complicated than we have time to discuss on this program, Jeff. My parents decided to settle in Beverly Hills, of all places. So the culture clash was even that much more pronounced. But the community was very open and welcoming, the Jewish community, that is. And it was critically important for our ability to adapt to life here in the United States.
What a story. What a story. And from there, you ultimately found your way to Sinai Temple.
Yeah, so ultimately found our way to Sinai Temple when we got married. My wife and I, 30 years this month, actually, ago. So August 1981. Mazel tov.
That's fantastic.
My story is, the immigration story is not unique here in the United States. And we see this at Sinai Temple, but we see it all over the country. We see it all over Los Angeles. It's a country of immigrants that to this day presents an unbelievable pull, sight unseen. My parents never came to the United States before they wanted to come to the United States. Sight unseen. They always wanted to come to the United States. And that continues to be true today, no matter what difficult times we might have at any one particular point in time. And these are certainly difficult times. This country uniquely still presents this unbelievable pull on people across the world. There are obviously many reasons for that, but obviously the promise of freedom, which it manifests itself in so many ways, people understand worldwide that it's still true here. And I think we are well served to continue that legacy in this country.
Does anything else stand out in your mind, Andrei, of ways that this sense of freedom just kind of smacked you in the face when you got to the United States?
I mean, look, the freedoms here in the United States have always been and continue to be very broad-based. It really is, I believe it's a result of our constitutional foundation. But it's the concept that you can, and the next generation can literally do anything that they put their minds to. And there is that hope and opportunity to do that. It's the freedom and opportunity to try, freedom to succeed, freedom to even fail. Believe it or not, not every place has that. And freedom to reap the benefits of your hard work. It manifests itself in so many different ways. For myself as an immigrant, and I'm sure others who have had this experience, we understand that fundamentally.
Amen. Should we talk a little bit now, or more than a little bit, Andrei, about the experience as in the Patent and Trademark Office?
Please.
So I got to ask you, did you just wake up one day and turn to your wife and say, you know, sweetheart, I think I should become the Commissioner of Patents and Trademarks?
Yeah, very funny. No, I don't think anybody can make any plans to that effect. Nobody can, and I get asked by, when I was in office, young folks, I spoke to a lot of them, they would say, so, you know, what does one have to do to become the director of the Patent and Trademark Office? Like, I have no idea. There's literally no playbook, none. So the way the political nomination process works is an absolute mystery. And frankly, especially to the folks that go through it, it becomes an even bigger mystery. But yeah, look, I've been involved with electoral politics from LA for quite a few years, never at the presidential level, but usually at the congressional and Senate level and the like. Nothing really outstanding, but the fact that I had some involvement in politics, the fact that I have this interest in intellectual property and the patent system, I guess people talk and things happened.
So you have 2 degrees in engineering from UCLA in addition to your law degree from UCLA, is that right?
That's right. UCLA all the way through.
Okay, great. And you worked as an engineer before you went to law school, right?
Right. Hughes Aircraft.
And you decided to go to law school because?
Another excellent question that there is no real good answer for, but I had a quarter life crisis probably, Jeff, at that time. And we were expecting our first baby and I kind of freaked out. So, but look, in the grand scheme of things, I've always, so I enjoy technology and I really enjoyed being an engineer, designing satellites and the like, but looking down longer term, I thought it would be perhaps more interesting to me over time to be able to deal with more than one area of technology. So, I thought, how can I do that and, still be able to make a living? And, law and in particular, intellectual property law presented that opportunity. But one of the nice things about intellectual property, patents, copyrights, trademarks, is that it's one of the last things that actually has bipartisan interest. Doesn't mean that everybody agrees with you, but it means that the divisions are not your typical Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative divisions. They're truly bipartisan issues. So some of my biggest supporters were Democrats and Republicans, and I had opponents who were Democrats and Republicans. The issues cut along intellectual lines, along technical lines, industry lines. And it's really nice to see because it avoids all the craziness that we read about in the papers, and you can actually have substantive discussions and have decisions and policy decisions that are being made on the actual merits of that result from a robust intellectual discussion.
So let's talk about some of those merits, Andrei. First of all, when you're the director of the United States Patent and Trademark Office, what do you do? What does the job consist of, really?
So there are really 2 jobs, Jeff. So the position is Undersecretary of Commerce for Intellectual Property and second, the director of the US Patent and Trademark Office. And they are really 2 jobs. The first one is an undersecretary. The position is you are the principal advisor in the administration on all intellectual property policy issues for the United States, domestic and international. So what should the United States policy be on patents, copyrights, trade secrets? What should the US policy be, from an intellectual property perspective with respect to certain trade issues and the like on the international stage? So that's a policy question on IP specific, and you advise the Secretary of Commerce, and through that, you advise the President or whoever else member of the cabinet that cares about this, other agencies. The second job is the director of this agency. The agency has 13,000 people, and almost 4 billion, $3.5 to $4 billion budget, depending on the year. None of those dollars come from the US taxpayer, by the way. It's all self-funded with user fees. So you're the CEO, effectively, of this, $3.5, $4 billion enterprise. And everything that comes along with the CEO duties is part of the job, right? You have personnel issues. We had unions. We had 3 unions. We had to deal with the union, with union issues. IT issues, computers and the like, and making sure you balance the budget and you don't go over. You're in really big trouble if you go over, because there's no bailout by the taxpayer for this agency, and the like. So those were the main functions. I spoke publicly a lot. I traveled to see our allies and my counterparts in countries around the world, Israel included. It was definitely a very rewarding.
One of your predecessors in this office was Thomas Jefferson. Is that right?
Well, yeah. So Thomas Jefferson, very few people know this. Thomas Jefferson was the first patent examiner. There are some very famous patent examiners out there. Most famously, Albert Einstein, right? He was at the Swiss Patent Office examining patents when he came up with the theory of relativity. But Thomas Jefferson was the United States' first patent examiner. So one of the first laws the United States passed after the country was founded was the Patent Act of 1790. So the law gets passed. It's the 4th law that gets passed after the country gets established. And right away, people are beginning to file patent applications. And there are not that many people in government at the time. So the duties went to a committee of 3 that the Secretary of State at the time, Jefferson at the time, was the head of. So, he would take this box of papers every night at home and he would examine patents at home. I don't think he liked it very much. He didn't do it for very long, but definitely he was the first one to do it here in this country.
Well, those were big shoes to fill, Andrei. Before we get to your accomplishments in the office, let me ask you, you mentioned you're a 30-year member of Sinai Temple, committed member of the Jewish community. Were there ways in which Jewish identity and Jewish values came into play in your role in these offices?
Obviously, you try to keep religion and that kind of stuff out of government, but on a personal level, these are very difficult positions, and they're substantively challenging and like any other leadership position. But obviously, in the federal government at that level, you have the public eye trained on you at all times, and that can be disconcerting, especially if you don't have a lot of experience doing it. And you see that a lot of folks get in trouble. They say the wrong thing and they do the wrong thing, and they shouldn't say or shouldn't do a variety of things. And, we sit out here and we read about it in the paper and we scratch our heads and we say, how could they have said that or done that? But look, having a good grounding in our values that we all share, that you can always rely on, I think that was tremendously helpful. We're trained to, through in our community, to be fair and to be kind to others, and to always think about what's right every step of the way. Anyway, so that provides some level of grounding. And I think folks who come from well-grounded communities into these government offices usually, not always, but usually tend to navigate those challenges in a bit of more smooth way.
Tell us about the wintertime seasonal display in the Department of Commerce.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, at the Patent Office. So the Patent Office is part of the Department of Commerce. The Department of Commerce has a number of agencies. The largest one is NOAA, the National Ocean and Atmospheres Administration, the people with the weather. You get your weather from them. So anyway, so NOAA is large, has about 18,000 people. But the second one is the USPTO, and there's a number of others. They're all part of the Department of Commerce, but the patent office is separate from the physical building in downtown DC. So the patent office has its own beautiful buildings in Alexandria, Virginia. But obviously every year they, at Christmas, the holidays, they put up a beautiful, humongous Christmas tree. So I got there. I thought that was very nice and looked great. But the first holiday season, I asked, where's the menorah? And they said, oh, we never thought about that. So we don't know if we can put a menorah up. Anyway, by the time they figured out that whether you can or can't, because all kinds of laws or things to look into, it was too late. But we got ready for the second season. So now they display a menorah next to the Christmas tree, and so that's nice.
That's wonderful. Andrei, you talked about kindness to people, getting along with people, and we're in such a politically polarized age. You worked for President Trump in the Trump administration. Love him or hate him, he's a very polarizing figure, and people do either love him or hate him. And we hear about the high degree of partisanship, cancel culture, estrangement of families, people who can't get along with each other. What is your view of how was it for you being part of the Trump administration? Were you ostracized? Did you lose friends? Did you make friends? And were there differences between the experience you had in Washington and how you experienced these issues in Los Angeles?
Well, counsel, that's a compound question.
You may object, but I instruct you to answer notwithstanding the objection.
Thank you. Let me see. There are a lot of questions in there, but yes. First of all, we do live in super polarized times, and as I said a bit earlier, it's really unfortunate because it takes our eye as a nation off the issues that really matter, and we can't. It's impossible to get to a thoughtful discussion of the merits of the issues that really matter. I believe that I was blessed and privileged. My office is not really a political, it's definitely not partisan office. So, we were spared all of that. I certainly was spared all of that. And I had phenomenal bipartisan relationships. To this day, I do, even after I've left office. And I think that can be a model for many other issues. And I think it's so critically important. I can't emphasize enough. And I don't know if we're going to have time to get to this, Jeff, but the nation is in such a incredibly intense, competitive climate, internationally competitive climate for the technologies of the future and the issues that matter. And while we're sitting here tearing at each other on this issue and that issue, our competitors overseas are racing ahead with a single-minded focus to dominate the technologies of the future. And it would be so, it is critically important that we try to do the best we can to put aside some of these issues that ultimately do not make a difference in the grand scheme of things, and work together towards solutions that help the nation move forward. And I do think, issues like intellectual property are of that sort, and they could form a model for others. In terms of working in the Trump administration, when you're in the inside, you see things that are reported differently outside. Now, again, I was not right in the middle of things, but the folks I dealt with, you're dealing with people who come there and try to do the right thing for the country. And they, in my areas anyway, they work hard and they try to do the best they could. And sometimes they got it right, sometimes they got it wrong. But that's true with every administration. What is super interesting in Washington, D.C., at least for me, what I found is that people in the streets and in general are actually on a day-to-day basis. I'm not talking when they're in the halls of Congress actually working, but just people in general are friendly and try to avoid the divisive political discussions, so that, because you never know who your neighbor is or what administration your neighbor served in and what their political views are and what agency they serve for and so on. And, you can have super civilized and close relationships with people across the political spectrum. I actually, counterintuitively a little bit, I find things to be more more divisive in Los Angeles, which is far away from DC, and perhaps because people in Los Angeles, are removed from the seat of government. But while you're here in the middle of the whole thing, life has to go on, and I think people are a bit more careful to put those divisive issues aside. The media doesn't portray those things. The media portrays all the fights and all the screaming matches up on Capitol Hill. They have to remember there are thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of employees in the federal government. And, whether they're political or career, vast majority of them, whatever party they're in, they're here to serve the nation. They're making usually financial sacrifices to do that. And they're really trying to do the right thing by the country. And I think, I really wish the media would portray a bit more about the in and out, the day-to-day lives of folks who dedicate their lives to serving the country.
Andrei, let's talk a little more about patent issues and what difference they make in people's lives. One issue that's in the news quite a bit is patent protection for the COVID injections, COVID vaccines.
Yeah.
What impact does that really have on people's lives?
Well, look, the fact is that almost everything we're dealing with in life nowadays, in today's world, is based on human innovation. The human innovation has delivered vaccines, not one, but multiple vaccines in a record period of time. In less than a year, since the pandemic arrived on our shores, 3 vaccines were approved in this country and multiple others in other parts of the world. That doesn't just happen. It didn't just, fall out of the sky. It is based on decades of innovation that builds upon itself. Now, that innovation in the United States, in any country, the innovation has to be funded, right? People have to work with it within the system to, and make the right investments of finances and time in order to create and generate that innovation. In some countries, like in Russia, when you have a centralized government, the government can subsidize all of the innovation. That's not the way it works in the United States. It shouldn't work that way. And in the United States, we benefit greatly from the private sector investing in the innovation ecosystem. So for the private sector to invest in the system, you need patents and patent protection and other types of intellectual property protection. And that is, you would not have this type of innovation without without the private sector contributing greatly, also public sector, of course, but you need the private sector as well. In fact, it dominates. And for that, you need patent protection. And without it, we wouldn't have had the types of vaccines and that we have here. I don't think it's a coincidence that that the United States is a leader in the vaccine area.
So it's your view that if these vaccines are deprived of their patent protection, it would be a disincentive to the development of future vaccines, future innovations?
Yeah, so just for background, folks might have read actually this is one of the few times that patents have made it to the front pages. There is an international push to waive patents on vaccines and other COVID-19 related technologies. I believe, and I've spoken publicly about this, that would be a tremendous mistake, really bad for the United States, but bad for humanity overall, because it would hamper innovation. It would hamper the distribution of these technologies across the world and have the exact opposite effect of what the proponents are trying to do. What the proponents are trying to do by waiving patents is probably the right thing. People want to achieve vaccine equity in countries around the world. It is true, no question, that we are living in a world of inequity in a variety of ways, but in particular in medical care. And in particular, it's coming to a pointed head here in the distribution of vaccines. Some countries are swimming in vaccine doses and have many, many more doses than needed at the moment. And countries are hoarding, some countries are hoarding vaccines. While here we are in the United States, for example, we're vaccinating children, teenagers, young people across the board, and we're begging everyone to get the vaccine, and there's some resistance in some circles. Whereas in many other countries in the world, they haven't even administered one shot to the most vulnerable elderly and folks on the on the front lines of the pandemic. So there's no question that something needs to be done to create more equity. But it's not by waiving patents. That would have the opposite effect, because that would disincentivize companies like Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and others from cooperating with other countries to get broad-based distribution. What needs to happen is for countries, including the United States, to do away with export controls on these vaccine doses. Let the companies that are manufacturing here in the United States distribute on a worldwide basis in a more equitable fashion. Financial help needs to be given to poorer countries who can't afford to buy some of these vaccines. And other regulatory and logistical issues need to be addressed. But the last thing that's going to make a difference here is the patent waiver. And it's unfortunate that this is what the international debate has come to.
If patent protection were waived, could every country just manufacture its own vaccines?
No. I mean, I don't think anyone can really do it. Because they're really complicated processes, Jeff. As you know, each one of these vaccines has hundreds of components in them, and some of these components are biological components. You have to mix them in the precise dosages under the absolute precise temperature and humidity controls and all sorts of other things. It would take, the estimate is it would take 18 months to stand up a new factory from complete scratch to be able to manufacture. Plus, you need the know-how. Where are they going to get that know-how from? But that's why I think it's a red herring of a point. And as a worldwide community, we'd be much better off trying to get the countries together and say, okay, this country has that many extra vaccines, this country has none, and let's try to find an equitable way to distribute across the world.
Let's change up and talk about trademarks for a couple of minutes, Andrei. You're also in charge of trademark policy and administering the trademark system. You just want to give us a brief definition of what a trademark is?
Yeah. So first of all, a patent protects an invention, technology, right? So you come up with an idea, you create a product from it. If you're the first one to have done so and the government agrees, the patent office will issue you a patent, which gives you, theoretically at least, exclusive use of that technology for the next X number of years. It varies a little bit, but approximately it's 20 years from the filing of the patent application. Trademarks are different. Trademarks are designations of the source of origin. So, brands, names, the name Coca-Cola, for example, is trademark. When you see the name Coca-Cola on a product, at least you think who is the manufacturer. So a trademark designates the origin of the original manufacturer. They could be, so as I said, they could be brands, they could be slogans, right? So Nike is a brand, Just Do It is a slogan. But when you see Just Do It, you already know that's coming from the Nike factory. Or a shape can also be a trademark. Famous shape is the Coca-Cola bottle. You see it, you don't need to see a name on it. You just instantly recognize it as coming from the Coke factory, as an example.
Andrei, the trademark issue that seems to be having the biggest impact on society right now has to do with whether you can register vulgar or offensive trademarks. The word FUCT registered as a trademark, and there's also been controversy over the team that is now called the Washington football team and the rock and roll band made up of Asian American musicians that wanted to call themselves the Slants. There was a Supreme Court case saying that they could do that, notwithstanding the fact that that might be offensive to some people. What is your view about the impact on society in general of this trend to be able to get trademark protection for vulgar or possibly offensive trademarks?
So for the longest time, the modern Trademark Act has been around for 75 years or so. For the longest time, the Trademark Office refused to register vulgar marks. Now, that you're free to do it if you don't violate other laws. I mean, you're free as an individual or a private citizen to wear a T-shirt that says FUCT. But the question is, are you allowed, or should the U.S. government put that brand on the United States Trademark Register and give you a Circle R designation as a registered mark? So, both Jeff and I mentioned FUCT because that's a real case. So we, the Trademark Office, we refused to register FUCT. We said it was offensive. We don't need to say the word. You can all pronounce it in your own heads. So we thought that was offensive. So we refused to register, as we've done for a very long time. They challenged that under the First Amendment and saying that's a freedom of speech issue. And they actually won in the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals reversed our decision and said, well, yep, the statute, which is 75 years old now, is unconstitutional in that way. So you can't refuse registration for offensive marks. That happened before I got to the office. But when I got to the office, I had to decide whether to take that challenge further to the Supreme Court, because we had lost at the Court of Appeals. And I thought, yes, we should take it to the Supreme Court, see what they say, because I don't think it's good for the United States. I don't see the benefit of, me personally, don't see the benefit of registering such vulgarities. And in any event, so we took it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court agreed with the district court decision, with the appellate court decision, and found the statute, again, 75 years old, but now they discovered that the statute was unconstitutional and forced us to register the mark. And by the way, so obviously we right away register the mark, and I keep it here in my home office. I'm very proud of this. This is the mark that we had to issue, okay? The office gave it to me as a present. So here it is. I don't know if you can see it, okay? It's the United States of America registering FUCT. So there you go. And it's signed by me here at the bottom. That's my signature. There you have it. The problem with this, Jeff, is not this particular word, obviously, which now in today's world we have gotten accustomed to. Almost anything goes now. We see in the office the most horrendous, mind-blowing, horrible things, and you have to ask yourself, what exactly is the benefit? But anyway, it is what it is. That's what the court found, and that's obviously what they're doing.
And it's your view that, well, the court has said you have to do it, so you have to do it.
Yeah, it's the Supreme Court. They obviously have the last word on this. Now, theoretically, Congress could write a statute. The Supreme Court it's called the Brunetti case, Iancu v. Brunetti, by the way, again, another point of pride. The Supreme Court did leave a door open for Congress to write a statute that would prevent the registration of obscenities. You have to carefully define obscenities. I don't see any legislative appetite on Capitol Hill to take this issue on.
Oh, an interesting issue from a social perspective, practical impact on people's lives, the products we see on shelves and online. Now, Andrei, we have just a couple of minutes left. The third origin story. Tell us a little about what you're doing now. The think tank, I believe you're in Washington, D.C. tonight. You still have a lot of official responsibilities. So please tell us what you're doing now.
I am still in Washington, D.C. By the way, do I see here Lou, who's a former patent examiner? Is that true? Hello. Excellent. Great to see you. I am, back at my law firm as an intellectual property lawyer in Los Angeles mainly, but we are opening up an office here in Washington, D.C. as well. Advising clients as always. So that's a lot of fun. But I'm also now, I've joined the think tank, the Bipartisan Center for Strategic and International Studies, known as CSIS, where we launched a project called Renewing American Innovation. So I'm doing that as well to continue to discuss policy issues of importance to the United States from an innovation and intellectual property perspective. Sorry.
Yeah. What issue's number one on the agenda for the think tank, Andrei?
Oh, quite a few issues. I'll give you a couple of examples. One issue is the diversity of innovation. Innovation in the United States is highly concentrated. It's concentrated geographically on the coasts, and the few pockets inside the country. But there are vast swaths of the United States that do not participate. It's concentrated demographically. Of all the inventors on patents filed in 2019, for example, the last year we measured when I was at the PTO, only 13% actually, 13% of inventors are women. The percentage for people of color is even lower. So anyway, so effectively, the United States competes in this worldwide innovation economy with one hand tied behind its back. So that's got to change for many reasons. So we're thinking about issues of that sort. We are very much focused on the technologies of the future, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, biotechnology, 5, 6G, autonomous vehicles, and the like, and are very mindful of the fact that right now, China has more patents than the United States in all of those areas. China publishes more scientific and technical articles in peer-reviewed journals than the United States in all of those areas. China controls more standard-setting committees in all areas of that matter for the standards of the future, such as 5G and the like. And China graduates dramatically more science and engineering folks with advanced degrees than the United States. When we're talking about the next industrial revolution, America's leadership in the world is not guaranteed by any stretch. We certainly can win the race We're at the beginning of it, but we haven't gotten off the blocks in a very in quite as successful as a way as we have been used to for the past 150 years. If we are not careful, in just a handful of years here, we're going to find that we will lose the technological lead in some of these really important areas. To be frank, if I have a choice as to who is going to control the technologies of the future, a repressive dictatorship versus a free democracy, I choose the latter. But for us to be able to do that, we need to get our act together. So we're focused on those discussions as well.
What's Act One? It sounds very serious. What are the first steps?
It's extraordinarily serious. Here's the first step. The United States does not have an innovation policy. People have heard of China's Made in China 2025 policy, Made in China 2030 policy, and the like. Those are national policies that country has for what they are going to focus on as a nation into the future. They're not the only ones. Other countries, some of our allies have policies. We've never had any type of policy like this. Neither have we ever faced this type of competition. So having a national policy, and now some folks are discussing this. There has been a report, comprehensive report on artificial intelligence that was just published last month, or maybe 2 months ago now. And that's a good beginning on that particular area of technology, but we need much more and much more. We need to be much more comprehensive. We need to invest more as a nation in research and development. We have stagnated in relative terms. We have stagnated for several decades. But anyway, we don't have enough time here, Jeff, to to discuss all the things that have to be done really at step one. But let me leave you with this thought. In the early 1960s, the United States faced a Sputnik moment when the Russians, we realized, we were taken by surprise that they were the first to put a satellite, a spacecraft, a human-made craft into space. The nation focused its mind at that point under the leadership of President Kennedy. He gave the famous speech, and he said that by the end of the decade, the United States will put the man on the moon. People back then, the country came together. Children wanted to be astronauts. Everybody wanted to be involved in the space race, and we prevailed. We were focused. We had a plan as a nation, and we prevailed. There's no question that the United States has what it takes to prevail again. The question is, where is the leadership? Where is that focus as a nation? These are the things we're going to do. This is the plan to get there. And here are the steps that we're going to take to get there. We have examples in the past. Let's use our history and try to replicate as best as we can. And I'm very hopeful that if that happens, we will prevail again.
Andrei, when you ask where is the leadership, I know what every single person on this call is thinking. We are so happy and so proud that you are part of that leadership and that you are an active member of Sinai Temple. We're so proud to call you one of our own. Thank you for your service to our country. Thank you for all that you've done to help improve the way we live here in the United States through your service in the intellectual property system. Thank you. I'm going to turn it back over to our Sinai Temple president, Mike Silberstein. Mike, I know there have been some questions popping up in the chat. Mike, thank you for the opportunity to interview Andrei. Thanks to everybody who's been on the line. Andrei, most of all, thanks to you. Mr. President, back to you.
And thank you, Jeff. Great job. Thank you.
So I'm going to pay accolades to you in both in just a minute. I think it was fantastic. I do want to ask a few of the questions that came in the chat. So Andrei, here's a question. How about improving our children's education to get more engineers, etc.? What's a good 1 minute answer on there?
None of these are 1 minute answers, Mike, but I couldn't agree more. So look, here's something we did at the US Patent Office, and you can go online at USPTO.gov. We have a page there that we created while I was there last year called Expanding American Innovation. Okay. And we created a national council, the National Council for Expanding American Innovation. It has leaders from industries, CEOs, from many large companies, small companies, university presidents. What we need is to identify where along a child's life do we lose them from science and technology potential careers. You know, when they come in kindergarten, they're all coming in with curious minds across the board, across the United States. Somewhere in middle school, math, it becomes no longer cool. And so that's a potential problem. Let's identify it, let's be specific, and let's have suggestions and best practices that schools across the country can implement. But then we keep losing folks. We lose folks at the high school level. We lose folks at the entry level in college, and we need to be specific about all those entry points and have specific plans and solutions to those points. And in addition to that, here's something that freaks people in government out. We need to have measurable results. We need to set for ourselves, we need to say, okay, here are the goals that we're gonna have in terms of science and technology education in middle school, in high school, in college. Be specific about them, and then we're gonna hold you, each one, accountable. The leaders in those areas, we're gonna hold you accountable to those metrics. And there's nothing wrong if we come short, because then it tells us, let's try something else. But we need to know and be specific about what we need to do. Education is absolutely the place to begin. It's not the only place. We lose people in the hiring process. We lose people in the promotion and retention and promotion process.
Fantastic. There was a great question when we were talking about the vaccines. And in particular, the question was, what about patenting repurposed drugs? I think it's called off-labeling, or you're probably familiar.
There are patents, of course, on repurposed drugs. You know, there's nothing wrong with that, as long as they're innovative. The repurposing is innovative, and you need that incentive and protection in order for companies to invest the tremendous amount of money it takes, even with an existing drug, to prove it out on a different application. Those processes take hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions. And it's really important to be able to have that protection so that companies make the right investments. I'll give you an example. AZT, famous drug for treating HIV and the like. It was a failed cancer drug. Somebody figured out that it works for this purpose, but in order to do that research and development and to get it approved by the FDA, it takes a huge amount of investment.
That's a great example. A question back to any thoughts about the patentability of AI, artificial intelligence generated invention?
You know, I'm glad that people are asking, and on this call, like tiny, small, very easy to answer questions. This, Mike, is a fascinating topic. Okay, so it's a very good question. What do you do if a machine invents something on its own without human interaction? Should we give patents on that invention? If you think about it, one of the purposes of the patent system is to incentivize an inventor to spend time and energy and money to create something. What's the machine gonna do? So the machine says, "Oh, I'm gonna get a patent. I'm gonna start inventing more now that I have a patent." And then if the machine is the inventor, who owns that patent? Does the machine now have to own the patent? Lawyers here on this call will recognize that you can't really, there is no concept of objects owning property. So then if it's not the machine who owns the patent, who is it? Is it the owner of the machine? Is it the original manufacturer of the machine? Is it the programmer of the machine who actually gave it its intelligence? It becomes super problematic. Now, these are not hypothetical questions. This is happening right now. The US Patent Office received an application from a machine called Dabus, and Dabus said it invented something by itself and filed its application. We rejected the application, and Lou, our former examiner here, we did not reject it for patentability reasons. We rejected it on a formality, missing parts. It did not list an inventor, a human inventor. So I think that's the current law in the United States. The Europeans likewise rejected it. The UK rejected it. But just this week, or last week, Australia, the patent office in Australia also rejected it, but an Australian court wrote an opinion overruling the Australian patent office and said that they should grant the patent to Dabus. So we'll see what happens in Australia and thereafter. But these are very relevant live questions.
So Andrei, I don't know why you would think when you come to the Sinai audience that the water would not go deep and, really deep, really quick. I have to make a judgment here because there's a couple of, I'm going to read you a few questions and say in the next 5 minutes, however you would like to address them, because they are all fantastic questions. So the first one here is somebody wants to know, by the way, do you teach a Talmud class? Because they're very intrigued with how you come up and you get to your reasoning. So I don't know if that's something that you're considering, but you have a few votes from out here to offer a Talmud class. Okay. What was it like to practice IP law when you first started? Has the practice evolved, and where do you see it going over the next few decades? Let me just give you that one, and just a question here on, was there any decision that you had to make in the administration that challenged your Jewish values?
I'm not teaching the Talmud class, but the fabulous new potential career we should be discussing, Mike. If I have had enough about with respect to this IP stuff. But I have, prior to my government service, I teach one class at UCLA on patent law every year. I haven't done it in 4 years now, but I enjoyed it very much. How has the practice evolved of IP law, and how was it at the beginning? Look, I'm biased, but I think it's a phenomenal practice because it will continue to be. You're dealing with the technologies of the future. You're dealing with stuff that most people will see a few years down the line. And you're dealing with some of the most creative minds out there, and it constantly changes, constantly evolves. So the subject matter is always interesting by definition. And the law tries to keep up with that as well. So it makes it a super interesting challenge. I think, unfortunately, it's not the greatest time right now for intellectual property. I have to say there are a lot of challenges on IP right now. We touched on it a little bit with the proposal to waive patents for the vaccine. There's a billboard. This is a little shocking. There's a billboard in Brussels, Belgium. Brussels is the seat of the European Union, okay? So they're trying to influence the decision makers there in the European Union. There's a billboard that shows a cadaver, okay? And the tagline is, patents kill. And that is so sad and so unfortunate. And it's such an easy gut level argument to make. People say, for example, choose patients and lives over profits and patents. These are such easy things to say, but folks do not appreciate that without the patent system, we wouldn't have these vaccines in the first place. And we wouldn't have all this groundbreaking, life-saving technologies in the first place. And I find that challenging, and it's increasingly more so. And I'm really hoping that that discussion will return eventually to a more balanced discussion so that folks understand the incredible benefits that inventors over time, going back to, Thomas Edison and the Wright brothers and Steve Jobs, to the present day vaccine inventors and the like, all these incredible inventions. Not to forget one of my favorite inventors, Hedy Lamarr. I don't know how many people realize that Hedy Lamarr was a critically important inventor, in addition to being a famous Hollywood actress in the 1940s. So hoping that in the future kids grow up to look up to these folks as role models and heroes.
I have a question, Andrea. I missed it. I'm sorry for asking. Are you a patent agent? Did you take the patent bar exam?
I did.
Okay.
I did, and I've been a patent lawyer for a long time. So for folks who don't know, to be a patent lawyer, you have to take an exam administered by the patent office. It's not easy to pass, by the way, and you get the number. And so I had this for 20 years, whatever. So I get to the patent office as the director. You get sworn in, everybody says, congratulations, Mr. Director, welcome. And the very next thing, the head of the legal department of the patent office comes and says, sir, I have to take away your patent registration number, because you can't have one when you're the director of the patent office. So they took it away, but of course they gave it right back when I left a few months ago.
Andrei, you've really opened our minds. You've gone, broad, you've gone deep. We're in so much gratitude that you've spent the evening with us. And by the way, we realize that it's approaching 11 p.m. in DC, and what your secret is, what vitamins or caffeine, but you're looking like you could run to the Capitol and back. You're looking fantastic. So,
well, I'm not going to run that far just yet, Michael, but thank you very much. Really an honor to be with all of you. Fabulous questions, really, and I'm sure we could keep talking forever, but really great to be part of this community, and thanks for the privilege to spend a little time with you tonight.
No, and we all miss you. So we're all going to give you a virtual hug without masks. So I just want to let you know, it's a safe hug. And by the way, Andrei, I remember when you had spoken to all the Sinai young leaders in the Secrets of Success. And, as we get ready to put together, hopefully a program with that same group at Sinai, we're hoping that you can share these things to inspire not only us, but the young leaders as well, because you certainly have a lot of depth and breadth of real experience in working with all folks. And I think it's just amazing. So thank you so much for spending the evening with us. And that was amazing. And Jeff, I've learned something else here. I think first and foremost on the next presidential election, you need to be doing the moderating.
Oy vey.
And by the way, just as you walked us through, it was your questions and working with someone on White House level is amazing. So Yasher Koch, and well done, Jeff. It's great to be partnered along with you, and you've done such a great job there.
Great, Mike. You're doing a great job as president of the Men's Club. Thank you so much for your leadership and for affording me this opportunity.
Absolutely. So, hey, just a few minutes of housekeeping notes. One is I want to let you know our own Sinai Temple member, Mark Holocene, part of the Men's Club, could not be here tonight just because he's going to become a grandpa again soon. So if you see him, you could wish him soon a hearty Mazal Tov. Number two is on August 15th, Sinai Temple will be having a memorial for Norm Pell. Norm Pell, a dear member of the Sinai community, and just celebrating his beautiful life and what he's done for our community. So that's August 15th, I believe. I think a notice will be sent out soon, just giving everybody a preview here and sometime in the late afternoon, evening hours. And then last but not least, we will be having an in-person event at Sinai Temple Tuesday, August 31st. It'll be with David Siegel from Elnet. And you might be recognizing that name. David Siegel was the former Consul General from Israel in Los Angeles. He leads Elnet, Elnet is, by the way, the European version of APAC, even though they're not related. David is doing a phenomenal job of, tracking what's going on in Europe, and he'll be talking to us in Cohen Chapel about what's going on with the new government in Israel and Europe, and what's going on in the Middle East, what's the progress on the Abrahamic Accords. And that'll be 6:30 on August 31st. So with that being said, Andrei, do you want to close us out with any thought, anything that you want to leave with this group here? I mean, when are we going to see you again? What's your, I know you talked a little bit about your endeavors. Anything to just close out for the evening?
Yeah, well, no, I'm in DC right now, but most of my time I'll be spending in LA. So I'm back and forth. I'll see you all very soon, and hopefully at the high holidays. Let me leave you with this, Michael and everyone. I am incredibly, despite the difficulties of day-to-day life nowadays, especially in the pandemic and so on, I'm incredibly optimistic about the future. The fact of the matter is that we have experienced tremendous amount of innovation to date, but seeing what's coming down the pipe, I believe we have really seen nothing yet. When you talk about artificial intelligence operating at quantum speeds, autonomous vehicles, personalized medicine, combinations of these technologies working together in convergence between artificial intelligence and biotechnology and the like, the pace of innovation is accelerating at rates that we have never seen before. And I believe the standard of living of Americans and people around the world as a result will rise in proportionate fashion. And I think that if we all keep in mind what really matters and things that really are important in life, I think America's best days are still ahead.
Now that is very optimistic. Thank you for sharing that. Andrei, I want to let you know 90% of the folks who signed in today stayed till this very minute. Many thank yous are in the chat. I hope you guys get a chance to read through them, and wishing you a rest of the great week, Andrei and Jeff, and a good peaceful night of sleep, Andrei.
Thank you all very much. See you soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.